Anyway,
walking around.
the thing here is basically what Mr. Barber's aims are, is to foster creativity. He wants to get people to come here, and Brian knows more because he was here from day one. That's his baby. You can explain more what Mr. Barber wants. It's not about the bike. That's why the bike is not red. It's not a Ducati. It's a design exercise. And it's all about the procedure and the changes in technology and all that sort of stuff. But bigger than that is what Mr. Barber wants from this design center. And as he mentioned, it could be designing toasters or kettles or furniture, but it doesn't matter what. It doesn't have to be motorcycles.
Yep.
And the first thing, this was convenient because this bike was done in '93, so almost 30 years later doing this one, you can actually show what has happened, what has improved, what has remained the same, what could be learned from this, what could be learned from the new stuff.
This became the first project of the Barber Advanced Design Center, is to show how we've evolved over the last 30 years. And the kinds of tools we use now are all digital workflows of design, which is amazing.
And of course, with the new project, the advantage was we could scan this. So the biggest problem when you do a new bike is you need to have a starting point. It's very difficult to have nothing because you need a reference point for your ergonomics. So we knew about the ergonomics, what this was. So I could say I want to make the tank 40 mils shorter, the seat a little bit higher. That's where the foot peg positions are. And we had sections through the bodywork. So that bike started out with this bike, which I already done in 3D. Because remember, I did that bike in South Africa. I didn't have the luxury of having a 3D thing with me. I was sitting in a coffee shop or at home. So I needed references of everything. So from our centerline sections, from our 3D scan, which has got a couple of sections, and I had everything I needed to now go and do the new one. So it was kind of, that was a big help for me.
We scanned this bike. So we think we're the first people to laser scan a 1993 Ducati Supermono from tip to tail. Laser scan the entire thing so he could have a starting point. Because he wanted to stay true to the concept, the original wheelbase and the proportions.
Yeah, I mean, some things have changed. As I said, it's a little bit longer, the wheelbase. It's a little bit long. This is very short. You know, I think this is 1360. So this is a 250. That one will have probably double the horsepower. Could almost have double the horsepower of this one. At least the first ones. I think these only had about 58 horsepower, the first ones. They weren't that powerful.
Yep.
So that one will be closer to 130-ish. And so it's a little bit longer, it's a little bit taller, a little bit more space for the rider. And you know, we've just upgraded. Tire sizes are slightly different. As I said, the crankshaft heights are different. A few things were changed. And on top of the doing new bike, I also wanted to add some things to make the bikes easier to work on, make the ergonomics adjustable in a simple way that you could do the things that companies can do in 3 seconds rather than glue on blocks of foam or do silly things like that. So you'll see on that bike you can move the rider triangle around in space on the bike. And the idea is that you could also raise the chassis height, not the chassis height, you can raise your crankshaft height while retaining the same rest of the bike. So the idea was that what can you actually do if you think from day one? You know, so I'll show you. And also my steering head inserts sort of done it slightly differently to what people have done up to now. I've flipped things around. So you could move your steering stem further and backwards for those 15 millimeters of adjustment. And by putting in little inserts, you can change your angle. Anyway, also I looked at I wanted to make it easier for the bike to be worked on. So, you know, I looked at the old Formula 1s that used to jack up hydraulically, or the Suzuka 8-hour bikes. I've always thought that it's kind of stupid to have a race paddock stand front and rear that you can work on nothing really. You know, if it's hooked up here, then you can't really work on your swing arm. So that bike goes into the crankcase, which I designed. So I've got a pin that goes in it, locks in position, the whole thing raises up and down, it's balanced. You can move the front end, back end, all the frame, and it sits in mid-space. The other thing was to work on the bike, all the electronics on the left-hand side. So if somebody has to work on the bike, you can remove the bodywork. The guy working on the electronics works here, the guy in the suspension works on the other side. And the oil filler, the water filler is very accessible on top of the bike, more like a car, not like a bike with a little thing you have to put a funnel in, a thing with this hole the size of your thumb.
Yes.
So everything's been thought out to be a bit more practical. And the reason I did the engine thing is that when I did projects, I had to quite often grab a Ducati engine and take it to a bench where it promptly would fall over, because obviously they want to stand upright. So for the mechanics, I also saw in Aprilia they made like a fiberglass funnel almost. They put their engine into so they could work on it. Because none of them have ever thought that maybe they could make a stand that clips directly to the engine. And that's why this fragmentation of responsibilities, the engine guy who designs the engine never has to work on it. So why would you think of making it easy for the mechanic? Let me, maybe we can show you on the scale model how this all works. So basically, that goes on the side of the motor. And at the moment, the wheels, this is not attached to the chassis, so the wheels don't move. But otherwise, this is just a lever that can pull out, this can slide out. You just hinge it back, locks in position, and your bike comes up 50 mil off the ground. So you can remove your wheels, you can do whatever you want. And if you remove the whole bike, you have your engine sitting on it. And then we have a simplified stand which replaces this unit, which just sits on a desk or bench, or you can make it sit on its own stand that you could work on it standing up. The other thing that I wanted to do with this is also want to do a race platform. So you go to the racetrack, you don't work on a cement floor with a tape measure. You basically, the travels and the sags are already electronic, so you could read them on the outside pad or whatever else. But you could also, by doing this, you release it and the bike stands upright and it's got its full weight on the two scales. So you can go and sit the bike there and you can set it up and you know what your weight distribution is, both without the rider and with the rider. Okay, that's your filler cap for your radiator. You've got the level over there, so your catch tank is built into the frame. And on this we don't see it, but on the other design, there's also a filler cap here for the oil. So you want to fill your crankcase, you just put it in. Your two service areas are here. So it literally is that quick. You don't have to fiddle with stuff and move around with things. So we open it up. See, this is the, okay. So what's different on the suspension, this is a traditional suspension. Let's come out now. Okay, so this is a loop that goes across the top.
Yep.
And this just slides up and down on the fork. So this can be made fairly small. From your calipers, your brake lines go in there. This is pretty stiff as a structure by itself. So this could be made in carbon fiber, it could be made in anything. It's just a slider. And the idea, it was just that when you look at a lathe, your bed, they just sliders. It doesn't really matter. And your bushes are very close to where the loads are. So not got leverage on the first bush up here, like that. So this is very, very compact. And this slides up and down quite simply. So the brakes are inverted and I put cooling fins on the outside.
Yep.
They're not much bigger than the current ones, but these could be enlarged to whatever you want because you actually have the possibility to make them 360, which you can't on a normal brake because of the caliper clearances here.
Yep.
So this is something which can be modified. And this, of course, allows you to have a single shock, a single damping unit. If you come around here, Kevin, he's going to undo that. So you have a single damping unit. This actually doesn't have it on here, but that will have a locking bolt and a through pin, which is this will have a few grooves in it. So this can actually be moved up and down. And then this, you unbolt, and you'll see it now. You unbolt one bolt at the bottom, this slides out. So you could set up your suspension separately. You got modules, just come in and you put a new shock in. This will be, and then the other thing which you can't see either is the rear suspension. This is a torsion bar that goes, that is this torsion bar goes across the crankcases. And that's the lever, and the shock works in reverse. So when this goes up, it just pulls it. And the advantage is, obviously, if it's on the bike and it's shorter by 60 mil, than a long one that you have to close. So you don't have a long shock that you close, you have a short shock that you move. And by changing the leverage ratio on the rocker, you can have different spring rates within seconds. I didn't put it in here. This was done so quickly, but you could have different rocker with different little holes. You could say, okay, I want a spring rate which is so, and you can have them numbered. You change your bolt and you have a different spring rate without removing everything from the bike. So, okay, on this side, Kevin, can we take off the other side as well? We're going to remove that side as well so you can see it better. Okay, so we'll show you in a minute. So basically the cooling system, because I wanted to do it scientifically. I didn't want to bolt a flat piece of thing on the front and air finding its way there somehow. So I spoke with Rory Byrne, who's the ex-designer for Formula One for Ferrari, years ago. And essentially, you need about 800 mil of duct before the radiator. And you need to, obviously, slowly enlarge the duct. So the airflow goes down, diffuser. Yeah, the diffuser has to, so it slows down not more than 7 degrees. Now that I can find off the internet, and I can find it from the NACA papers. So this particular design is not developed fully. It's a conceptual design. We don't have the final radiator because that's going to be done with AI, so we don't know what it's going to look like. We know where it's going to plug into the motor and where the filler's going to be. All the rest in the middle, who knows? So you have your airflow. You come look here. That's duct number 1. So it goes to the radiator and it slowly slows the air down, ups the pressure, and then behind the radiator it closes again, and we can accelerate the air. Hot air along with the exhaust air fills up the low pressure area behind. So the hole gets filled up there. So here we go. This is the exhaust area. So the hot air from the radiator will extract here, and the hot air from the exhaust. Now this may change a little bit, and there may be additional ducting in this area to help. In theory, purely, this should have 0 additional drag from the radiators. If Meredith effect and all the research I've seen is correct, I will have 0 additional effect. So it's not the end of the world, but it's fairly substantial. You know, you think about what other bikes have to do. They have to get their air through the bike somehow, and then this will be filled up with the hot air. Now that could be ducted. There could be a duct here that you'd have to go to the wind tunnel and check it. So it's the whole idea was easy to work on, clean it all up, and then the thing I'm kind of excited about and proud of is, okay, that's my regulator. Okay. So I looked at regulators, I looked at alternators a bit, and I found some custom car alternators, and they call them one-wire alternators. So basically, the custom cars have a similar thing to the bike. I wanted to clean it up. They want to clean them up. They don't want stuff all over the place. So this goes directly onto your alternator. From there, there are no wires. It's all bus bars. This is my electronics unit. That's my battery with 4 2170 cells in it. All the other wiring is 3D printed wiring inside in a little block. Because now with 3D print, you can do whatever you want. They can be 3 mil apart. You put it in a little block of resin like you do with your regulator. Plug it in the back, plug it in the front. And then this is where my ECU sits. So this is the whole electronic system for the bike. So in here you have battery, which is as close as possible to the regulator. it bolts directly onto the bus bar that comes from the motor. So that bolts directly on.
Yeah.
And as we well known, I've been taught that the shorter that is, the better, because normally it sits up here somewhere or whatever. So this is it, all the electronics. The throttle body sits inside the plenum chamber, which is in here.
Yep.
So what we have, and I'll show you in a minute, we have a Roadtrek supercharger here.
Yep.
And I started out by getting I got a Panigale motor. We got both motors. Looked at it, I realized that the new motor is much bulkier than the old one because it has asymmetrical as a drive for the cam on this side and that side. So it ends up being 50 more wider than the old motor. Being supercharged and pumping the air through, it's less critical that you have so much bigger valve area. Mm-hmm. So that was the idea about it, is that this is actually a very good motor with a belt drive, everything else. So Roadtrek supercharger, these are new crankcases. I didn't want to take a crankcase from a Panther from 1978 and put it on a new bike. So the whole idea was the crankcase was machined new. The oil lines for that, for example, goes inside the crank. So you put an O-ring on there and just clamp it on. So your oil lines from here go into the front, run through the motor and out. Removing the starter motor, from your crank here, we have a little gear drivetrain here that's added on. So the crank has an additional gear on it, drives it down here. Over here we have a little flexible drive like they had on the Second World War aircraft. It's like a little rubber coupling. So I don't have a belt, it's mechanical and it's got a belt. This stand here is what you can use for your engine work. So this goes in the crankcase, strip the whole thing down, this is fixed. So you can do what you want. So you pump your air through there, this is your intercooler, which goes into your plenum chamber. But this, the intercooler, this and your plenum chamber and the throttle body is printed in one piece in 3D. Mm-hmm. So you don't have layers of stuff. Yep. So, and of course that's what 3D printing allows you to do. So that can be sintered. What this will look like one day, who knows? This will be the interesting thing. And the shape of the plenum may become spherical, it become, who knows? I don't know that. Kevin, so just this was done because it has to be made anyway. So the radiator's in there, and it would have a shape which we don't know what it will be, okay? And then this could either come out here, the air, or it can come out the top or on the sides, whatever is more useful for extracting the heat from the motor. So the frame is a carbon fiber frame, and it will have an open bottom, so you can design a little bit of flex into it. It won't be a box. So this won't have a bottom floor. The bottom floor is actually the crankcase. So the crankcase itself has been designed to create the bottom part of the duct. These are here to eject some heat from the exhaust. So the exhaust just goes over the top and out. And the length, I've got the correct length, or a pretty close length to what we'd need for this motor. So that was calculated for me. And I also found some amazing silencers somebody did for a Mustang. And they don't look like any of the silencers we've seen, the plates and the tubes and stuff. Yep. It's actually pretty organic inside. And it ended up weighing like 25–30% less. And they printed in titanium, the whole thing. So that will be much more sophisticated than this one. This silencer here is what I could design within the time that I had. Yeah. Okay, so this could be much more organic. Most likely you don't want it to square. It'll be softer, rounder. Then the, okay, so Brian, can you lower it down? Yeah, it looks very, very different when it's on the floor, both from the design point of view and also the proportions and stuff. So what we've got here, so that's the longest your tank can be.
Yeah.
And then over here we have, on the frame, we have 3 positions for for this unit. So the whole unit can go backwards and forwards. And then of course, this can have little spaces in there and you could raise it to whatever height you want. So you decide you want to go out, you want a guy sitting a bit higher, that is just a spacer inside here. So you can change all that. Then the thing I haven't added on here is that the idea was that the triangle can be moved as a unit on the bike. It's not like the guy goes back, only the guy and his pegs remain. When he moves, the handlebars move and the pegs move, so he moves the whole triangle. So you've got a triangle like that, whole thing can move in space. So he's got his comfortable area, but he starts at a different point. So with a bit more time, obviously one can sit down and say, okay, now each area needs to be developed. You have to go and say, okay, what's good and what's bad, and then figure it out. All my radiator air goes through the top. So I don't have to fix up my mess I've created like the normal bikes.
Yep.
I've actually done the ducts properly. So the ducts, in theory, should be ideal. And I should be able to get away with probably a third of the radiator size of a normal radiator,
Yep.
or less. When I spoke to Rory Byrne, he said that my radiator probably would be the size of a small side plate, which anyway is the size of the radiator's air going through on a normal bike anyway. They only have air going through a little piece like that. The rest is so shrouded by everything else. They are literally, or let's put it, they are real radiators. They're not heat exchangers. They radiate heat. That's why they're this size. So this, in theory, okay, so the crank height went up 50 millimeters. The motor is perfectly horizontal here, and that is mainly to be able to do the exhaust and the layout for the ducting properly. So this was actually just pushed down a little bit. The internal part of the crankcase internals are exactly the same as the standard Ducati. I even kept the two gearbox shafts horizontal. If one wanted to do it better, you would go and redesign all of it, and you'd gain yourself 40 mil, make a slightly stronger swing arm. And then the radiator, the water goes into the crankcase there, and then it goes straight into the radiator. The radiator has the pump, electric pump, as part of the radiator. So it's actually incorporated. It's got a little shaft, the motor sits at the top, it's got its impeller, so it just functions as a unit. It's not the separate bits. The whole idea was, let's do it the way it should be, not worry about what people think. This wasn't meant to be done to please anybody.
Sure.
It was meant to do the right thing.